This is my father's 10-inch Delta Contractors Saw, and I remember this thing being in the basement my entire childhood, and I inherited it when he passed. And it has a few shortcomings for my purposes. Number one is it's heavy and I can't move it. Number two is that motor hangs off the back. Really makes it hard to store. If I could move it, you can't push it up against the wall because that motor's hanging out there, and it takes up a lot of space. And as you might be able to tell, I am a little pressed for space in my shop. So here are a couple of things I did to make this motor feasible. Yeah, I did want to get rid of it, and I do need a table saw every once in a while. So here's what I did to fix it up. Alright, the first modification was to do something about getting this motor out of the way so that I could push it up against a wall when it was not in use. And this saw is not in use most of the time. So there's a pin here where the motor pivots on its cast iron mount, and you can simply take the belt off, and I put a little clip on the pin, and you lift up on the motor, you pull the pin out, and this motor is super heavy. Thank goodness I don't do this all the time. But as I said, this saw is not in use most of the time. Put the pin back in, and now there's a heck of a lot more space to push that thing up against the wall. And then you can just hang the belt there along with the power cord. So that's the first way that I improved it for the use of space in my shop. So the second thing I did was put casters on the bottom of each one of these legs. I don't like sawdust, and so not only did I want to be able to move the saw around, but I typically push it outside the garage door when I'm cutting. And before I bring it back inside, I blow the whole thing off with a driveway blower, a little gas-powered blower. But the angle on these stamped feet led to the casters being canted at an angle, and they just wouldn't turn real well. So I welded up a base, and let me show you that. I put it on a sheet of cardboard, marked out the corners, got my measurements. Now I'm going to weld up a frame to put underneath it. I'm going to add the casters to the frame, and we'll see how we do. Oh, and one thing I forgot to mention, this bracket, brace, vise, I'm not sure what you'd call it. It's a Stanley, a number 400 Stanley. I think it was for making picture frames or like holding wood right angle joints together. I found it at a yard sale. I think it was like $5, so I'm going to try using it for welding. So here's my solution. Using some old bed frame, I welded up welded. My welding skills are pretty poor. Anyways, made a little frame with casters on it, and this will go underneath. So let me pop that under the saw, and well, you get the idea, but I'll show you how it comes out anyways. There we go. Alright, the last improvement I wanted to make was I very often work with my miter saw on top of the table saw. It makes a nice surface to do that, and I had been just storing the miter saw on top of the table saw. You just put the blade on the table saw all the way down and store the miter saw up there. Store the miter saw, and store the miter saw up on top of the table. But I don't know, it's just not a good solution. It's in the way. Every time you want to use the table saw, the miter saw has to move, and it's just kind of a pain in the butt. So here's my solution. I made a little bracket. Let me back up here. I made this little bracket, and I'm going to install it right here on the side of the table saw, and then the miter saw will be able to tuck nicely underneath, and I can store it there when it's not in use. Let's see if I can get this done. Go. Not bad. I like it. So I made little returns on the end here so that the saw can't slip out sideways, and then I welded little tabs on the back here which keep it located, and as long as it can't slide to the rear, it's not going to fall out. So now we can store the saw up against a wall. The motor's flat. We have casters on a base, so we're able to move it around and push it up against that wall. And the table saw is tucked nicely. Excuse me. The miter saw, chop saw, is tucked nicely under one side. It's out of the way. You can still use the table saw. I don't have to worry about moving my chop saw anymore, tripping over it while it's on the ground. It's right there. It goes everywhere the table saw goes. So those are my improvements to the Delta 10-inch Contractors Saw. I hope somebody can get something out of that. And if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. And we'll see you on the next one. Back to work.